Imagine, just for a moment, the thick silence inside a Montecito mansion at 3 a.m. For most people, that hour brings calm. But for Prince Harry, it's said to have turned into something far more unsettling, a stage filled with shadows. The faint flicker of a laptop or the cold light from a phone screen isn't just showing headlines. It's reflecting what could be the unraveling of the life he worked so hard to create. There are persistent whispers, rumors that simply won't fade, that the Duke of Sussex recently received a message, not through official royal channels, but quietly through the palace's back corridors. It wasn't a birthday wish or an invitation to reconcile. It was something much harsher, an ultimatum wrapped in the precise, detached tone of the monarchy, delivered on behalf of a king who may have finally reached his limit. The message, as it's described, was stark. The House of Sussex is burning, and the threat is coming from within. For years, Harry and Meghan were seen as a united front, a couple standing against the world, two figures who walked away from royal constraints in exchange for the promise of freedom under the California sun. But what if that freedom was built on something far less stable, on choices and betrayals that were carefully calculated? This goes beyond tabloid drama or public disagreements. At the center is a claim so significant, so explosive, that it could reshape the entire narrative of their relationship. And it begins with a name from the past, Jessica Mulroney. Once considered the most trusted figure in Meghan's inner circle, Jessica was someone who knew everything, her ambitions, her fears, her private truths. But now, it's being suggested that she has shifted from being Meghan's strongest ally to perhaps her most dangerous opponent. The reason? A betrayal that cuts straight to the core of a marriage. To understand how things reached this point, we need to go back, before the royal titles, before the massive media deals, to Toronto on the set of Suits. At that time, Meghan Markle was steadily rising, driven, sharp, and determined. But breaking into Toronto's elite social scene wasn't easy, especially as an outsider. That's where Jessica Mulroney came in. She wasn't just a stylist. She was deeply connected, effectively Canadian royalty, by marriage. As the wife of Ben Mulroney, son of a former prime minister and a major television personality, Jessica had influence. She could open doors that had previously been closed. Their friendship appeared almost storybook perfect, a modern tale of powerful women supporting each other. Social media painted the picture clearly. Sunlit vacations across Europe, exclusive gatherings, and shared glances that suggested an unshakable bond. Jessica became Meghan's anchor in North America, the person reportedly taking late-night calls when a certain prince entered the picture. She helped shape Meghan's image and stood as a gatekeeper to her growing circle. When Jessica's children took part in the 2018 royal wedding, it symbolized what seemed like an unbreakable connection. But now, some insiders claim that beneath those polished moments, something far more strategic was unfolding. Meghan, known for understanding social dynamics, is said to have viewed the Mulroneys not just as friends, but as a gateway into a world she wanted to access. And Ben Mulroney, with his media reach and high-profile status, was a key part of that pathway. This leads to the most controversial claim of all, a shadow that, according to whispers, had been hanging over this relationship for years. Within Toronto's elite circles, rumors reportedly began circulating long before any public fallout. These weren't open conversations, but quiet exchanges shared over private dinners. The suggestion? That Meghan and Ben's relationship may have crossed boundaries, that it wasn't just professional or friendly, but something more inappropriate. While Jessica was busy building Meghan's public image and defending her from criticism abroad, it's alleged that Meghan was forming a deeper, more personal connection with her husband, right under her nose. Those close to the situation claim the signs were subtle but present, late-night conversations that stretched too long, interactions at events that felt unusually familiar, and a level of emotional closeness that seemed to leave Jessica on the outside. For a long time, It's believed Jessica chose trust. She saw their bond as a natural result of shared work and Meghan's need for stability in North America. But betrayal rarely arrives all at once. It builds slowly, wearing things down until there's nothing left to hold everything together. The breaking point came in the summer of 2020, but not because of those rumors. Instead, it was triggered by a public controversy. Jessica became involved in a social media dispute with influencer Sasha Exeter, sparking a wider conversation around privilege and racial sensitivity. Suddenly, she was at the center of intense scrutiny. At that moment, she reportedly turned to Meghan, the one person she expected would stand beside her. After all, Meghan had built her public identity around empathy and justice. But what she found instead, according to reports, was silence. Rather than offering support, the Duchess of Sussex is said to have distanced herself completely, a move many have described as calculated, precise, and rooted in self-preservation. No public backing, no quiet guidance, just complete silence. Meghan, focused on shaping her image as a global humanitarian, reportedly began to see Jessica as more of a risk than an asset. The phase of the relationship that had once been useful was now over. She had secured the prince, the title, and the global stage. The social ladder of Toronto's elite was no longer something she needed to climb. That very public distancing became the turning point for Jessica. It pushed her to revisit every chapter of their friendship, but now through a far more skeptical lens. What once felt like genuine moments, shared trips, private conversations, and time spent around Ben, now seemed, in hindsight, far more calculated and unsettling. Jump ahead to 2025. News emerges that Ben and Jessica Mulroney are officially ending their marriage. Publicly, the reason given was irreconcilable differences. But within Toronto's circles, a different narrative quietly circulated. The long-suspected affair, something whispered about for years, was now believed by some to have finally broken the relationship beyond repair. This time, however, Jessica wasn't staying quiet. Reports suggest she spent years carefully gathering what some have described as a detailed record of betrayal. This goes beyond emotional fallout. It's said to include digital evidence, messages, emails, and even travel records that allegedly place Meghan and Ben in the same places at the same times, often when Jessica was elsewhere. There are also claims that certain pieces of this material have already been shown to a very limited, highly influential group. This isn't being framed as an emotional reaction, but rather a calculated safeguard. Jessica, familiar with how powerful PR strategies can shape narratives, is believed to be holding onto this information as protection, ensuring that if her credibility is ever challenged publicly, she has the means to respond with verifiable claims. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, this situation reportedly didn't go unnoticed by the royal family. King Charles III, who has spent decades watching the monarchy navigate public scrutiny, is said to have been briefed on the matter and deeply unsettled by it. From his perspective, this wasn't just personal drama. It carried the potential to damage the reputation of the institution itself. A confirmed scandal of this nature, involving the Duchess of Sussex, would be immensely difficult for the monarchy to manage. Having experienced his own highly public marital struggles, the king is believed to understand that while the public may forgive many things, a narrative involving both betrayal of trust and alleged infidelity is far harder to contain. Sources suggest that, for Charles, this was a breaking point. Years of tension, legal battles, and public disclosures had already strained his relationship with Harry. But this situation raised the stakes. It shifted the focus from family reconciliation to institutional protection. And that leads back to the reported ultimatum in Montecito. During the holiday season of 2025, it's said that Harry reached out to his father, possibly seeking support or a way to reconnect as their media ventures began to lose momentum. But the response he allegedly received was not one of warmth. Instead, it was described as firm and conditional. The message, according to these reports, was clear. If Harry wanted to re-establish a future within the royal fold, along with the financial and institutional support that comes with it, he would need to separate himself from the controversy. And that meant ending his marriage. The weight of that decision is hard to ignore. Harry had already given up his country, his military role, and his place within the royal structure for a relationship he believed in deeply. Their public story had always been framed as standing together against external pressures. Accepting such an ultimatum would mean acknowledging that the foundation of that story may not have been as solid as it once seemed. But refusing it carries its own consequences. Remaining tied to a relationship now shadowed by serious allegations and potentially facing a prolonged conflict with someone as connected and influential as Jessica. He stands in a difficult position, caught between a past he can't easily return to and a future that appears increasingly uncertain. Looking at the state of the Sussex household in 2026, the situation appears isolating. What once looked like a strong alliance has reportedly turned into the beginnings of a legal and public relations battle. Harry, once among the most admired royals, now faces a deeply personal and complex dilemma. The story of Meghan and Jessica, in this light, becomes more than just a fractured friendship. It highlights the risks of relationships built on mutual advantage and the reality that in high-stakes circles, hidden truths rarely stay buried forever. To fully understand the depth of these claims, it helps to revisit where it all began, the exclusive, tightly controlled world of Toronto's elite. Places like Soho House and the private gatherings of Rosedale formed the backdrop. Back in 2011, Meghan Markle was driven and strategic. Talent played a role, but she also understood that access and connections were often just as important. Jessica Mulroney wasn't simply a friend. She was someone who could design pathways into influential spaces. While Meghan worked on Suits, Jessica was reportedly introducing her to key figures, politicians, media executives, and cultural influencers. And then there was Ben Mulroney, as a television personality and the son of a former prime minister. Ben was deeply embedded in those networks. At the time, the trio was often seen as a perfect alliance, constantly together, building both personal and professional momentum. But looking back, some now claim that even then, certain lines may have begun to blur. Meghan and Ben were said to share a connection that, to some observers, seemed to extend beyond ordinary friendship. They shared a common media instinct, a deep understanding of how narratives are shaped, controlled, and redirected. Jessica, always the devoted ally, is said to have viewed this closeness as an advantage. In her mind, having her husband and her best friend so aligned only strengthened her circle of influence. What she didn't realize, perhaps, was that she might have been unknowingly giving away control of her own domain. From a psychological standpoint, this dynamic reflects what critics often describe as climbing status through proximity. For Meghan, Ben Mulroney symbolized a level of legacy, authority, and media expertise she hadn't fully reached on her own. He operated as her equal in the world of public image and strategy. It's said they would spend long stretches discussing media tactics, analyzing coverage, and breaking down the nuances of Canada's political and cultural landscape. To outsiders, it appeared to be simple networking. To Jessica, it likely looked like her husband supporting her closest friend. But viewed from the perspective of 2026, those same interactions are being reconsidered with a much darker interpretation. Accounts from individuals present during the lead-up to the 2018 royal wedding describe subtle shifts, changes in atmosphere when Jessica would step away. There are quiet claims of moments that lingered a bit too long at charity galas or private exchanges tucked into corners of exclusive events that seemed to carry more meaning than casual friendship. One unnamed source reportedly linked to a Canadian media organization, suggested that the connection between Meghan and Ben was noticeable, almost as if they existed in their own orbit, one that occasionally left Jessica standing outside of it. From this perspective, Meghan wasn't simply becoming part of a family. She may have been, as some claim, embedding herself within it. When the Sasha Exeter controversy erupted in 2020, it was far more than a social media misstep. It became a serious reputational threat at a time when Meghan was carefully building her identity in California. The global climate, shaped by the Black Lives Matter movement, had elevated her voice after a widely recognized speech on racial justice. She was being positioned as a symbol of compassion and advocacy. Then suddenly, her closest ally was accused of leveraging privilege in a way that directly contradicted that image. The decision to cut ties, according to reports, wasn't driven by emotion. It was strategic. It's believed that Meghan's team in Montecito convened urgently to address what they saw as a growing liability. The conclusion was clear. Jessica had become a reputational risk. Any form of support, public or private, carried the danger of exposure. Even a leaked message could have undermined the carefully constructed persona Meghan had built. So, a decisive move was made. Jessica Mulroney was, in effect, erased. The same woman who stood at her wedding, who was part of her personal life, who had once been entrusted with her most private thoughts, was suddenly absent from the story. For Jessica, this wasn't just the end of a friendship. It was, as it's described, the moment she realized she may have only ever been a step in a much larger, far more calculated journey. People often talk about keeping receipts, but what Jessica is rumored to possess goes far beyond that. It's described more like an archive. Following the fallout in 2020, and as her marriage reportedly began to deteriorate under long-standing tensions, Jessica is said to have revisited years of communication. This included vast amounts of digital data, texts, encrypted chats, emails spanning from the early Toronto days all the way through their time connected to the royal sphere. What she allegedly holds isn't limited to claims of an affair. It's said to include strategic discussions, Meghan's unfiltered views on the royal family, early planning around her eventual departure from royal life, and possibly candid opinions about the very people who helped elevate her position. This collection of material is often described as her safeguard. It may also explain why, despite a reputation for legal pushback against critics, the Sussex camp has remained notably restrained when it comes to Jessica. When someone is believed to hold years of documented history, confrontation becomes a far riskier move. Instead, silence can sometimes be the safer choice, waiting and hoping nothing surfaces. It raises the question, why would King Charles III become involved in something that seems on the surface like personal drama? The answer may lie in how the monarchy functions. Beyond ceremony and tradition, it relies heavily on awareness and risk management. Senior advisors and internal teams are believed to monitor potential threats closely, including situations like this. If these allegations were ever supported by concrete evidence and made public, the damage wouldn't be limited to Meghan. It would inevitably reflect on Prince Harry as well, potentially casting him as someone caught in a deeply damaging situation on a global stage. From that angle, the reported ultimatum takes on a different meaning. It's not simply a father reacting emotionally. It's a monarch acting decisively, trying to contain what could become a far-reaching crisis before it affects the institution as a whole. Charles has witnessed this kind of turmoil before. He lived through the fallout of his own separation from Diana, a chapter that shook the monarchy to its core. He understands that public fascination with the Sussex story has its limits, and that limit is reached the moment the narrative shifts, from a couple seeking independence to one defined by calculated moves and personal betrayal. By reportedly pushing Harry toward a decision now, Charles may be attempting to regain control of the narrative before it's shaped by Jessica Mulroney or the media. There's another layer that makes this situation even more complex for Harry: finances. By 2026, much of the Sussex momentum had slowed. The major deals with platforms like Netflix and Spotify are either concluded or undergoing significant changes. Meanwhile, their expenses, especially security and maintaining their Montecito lifestyle, remain extremely high. The kind of income required to sustain that life doesn't typically come from charitable or humanitarian work alone. According to reports, the King's proposal includes a path back, financially and institutionally. If Harry were to return on his own, his financial burdens would reportedly be eased, his security reinstated, and his children's future safeguarded within the royal system. If he chooses not to, the alternative could mean tightening finances and a prolonged, high-stakes conflict with someone who may have nothing left to lose. At this point, Harry isn't simply choosing between love and responsibility. He's facing a decision between stability and uncertainty, between royal protection and the possibility of financial strain. Seen from this angle, the situation itself feels less about harsh decisions and more about the reality he now has to confront. Looking at the aftermath of these fractured relationships, one question lingers: can a marriage endure when its very foundation is being challenged by someone who once stood closest to it? Harry has already taken extraordinary steps for Meghan, walking away from his royal role, distancing himself from family, and reshaping his entire life. But if the claims tied to Jessica Mulroney hold any truth, if the person he built that life with was allegedly crossing boundaries with someone so close to their circle, then the sense of betrayal wouldn't be limited to Jessica. It would extend to Harry himself. So the question becomes, is he staying because of love, or because confronting the truth would be too difficult? As time moves closer to the King's supposed deadline, attention continues to build. This is no longer just a royal controversy. It has the weight and structure of a classic tragedy unfolding in real time, far from palace walls. The friendship is gone. The once tight circle has unraveled. And now, all eyes are on Harry, waiting to see whether he returns to the institution he left behind or remains committed to a path that grows more uncertain by the day. What do you think? Does Jessica represent someone seeking payback or someone revealing hidden truths? Share your thoughts below, and if you want to keep up with how this story unfolds, don't forget to subscribe for the latest updates.